Good afternoon. I'm Susie Farr. I'm at the University of Maryland at the Clarice Performing Arts Center. And I told Ben when I arrived today that I was going to be the old practical curmudgeon, not the visionary forward looker. But of course, listening to everyone else, I could just throw my notes away. First, let me say that about 2 years after the Clarice Smith Center opened, we developed a set of key messages to try to define who we were on campus. Anybody's going to build a new facility, I'd suggest you do that before the building's built. And the reason this was so difficult is that the words performing arts center create images in the minds of the people who pay for them and occupy them that may not be the images we want. And if I could start all over again, we would be the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center for teaching, research, and experimentation, because it doesn't mean physical halls with lots of seats, although none of our halls have lots of seats. The two other messages that we created that I think were really important for us, that again I wish they had thought of first, were what happens off stage is as important as what happens on stage. The performing arts are a product-driven business, and we end up valuing what happens on the stage more than what happens off. In a university, I think you can't have that kind of imbalance. I mean, I wish we didn't have it anywhere, but the process of teaching, of learning, of experimenting, of building and growing is far more important to us than what actually happens on the stage, although what happens on our stages is pretty wonderful. And the third message we created, which was more self-justification than it was intention, was that big experiences are more important than big numbers, because all our halls are small. And to Chuck's question about business models, ticket income is never more than 10% of our budget. And it wouldn't matter if I cheapened the tickets and sold more of them. We don't have enough seats. And so we really have defaulted to what happens to you when you're in our building is more important than how many of you are there. Prior to coming here, I called a couple of faculty members because it seemed kind of odd to me to ask me to talk about teaching and learning, since I learn all the time, but I don't teach, and said, you know, we've got this building that everyone loves, and it's relatively new, and it's huge. We have music, dance, theater, academic programs in the same building with all of their teaching and research spaces and 6 theaters and a library. I said, so what would you like? And they all opted for more specialized spaces. We don't have a lot of spaces that are shared, and they want even more that are not shared. We have a light lab. No other university where I've worked has had a light lab. It's a very boring, dark room that has its own lighting equipment, its own lighting control systems, and the visiting artists are rarely in there. Our students use it in their lighting design courses, and it gives them the opportunity when they're actually designing for the stage to use that space to experiment on what paint treatments look like under certain lighting. You walk in the room, if you're not in the arts, you think it's a terrible room. If you are in the arts, you say, gee, I wish we had one of these. We have no sound studios in our building, and we would like to have sound studios designed for both theatrical sound design and music recording that can be used by students and faculty for their coursework and also for their creative work on campus and off. And finally, I think it was Peter said something about, or no, it was somebody over here said something about wanting a messy room. The chair of our theater department said he wanted a dirty room. He wanted a dirty workshop for faculty and guest artists to teach and experiment with crafts such as puppetry and mask making. And that grows from the inherent conflict between the academic production work and the academic teaching work, which are related but not always the same. And in the end, when the theater department has a show that needs to go up, our shops are working on that show. And if they have a guest artist who is teaching, who needs to build in a separate space, we don't have that space. So we would like a minimally equipped carpentry and paint space with adequate ventilation, all for the purposes of teaching and learning. Finally, I would say that one of the questions that occurred to me that those of you who are faculty and administrators can help me figure out is, what is the impact of tenure on looking at the future of performing arts spaces? We have a faculty that is described internally by other faculty as deeply divided between the people who are in an old system, who love that system and want to maintain it, and people who want to change everything. And the people who are in the old system tend to be the tenured faculty. And it's very difficult for younger faculty to change those systems once they're in operation. Finally, I'd say the other question for us that is sort of different from some of us than others is the question of whether we are public or private institutions. If you are a public institution, you are likely to have more scrutiny. You may have more regulations. And at least in a small state like Maryland, the legislature keeps a pretty close eye on you. Our legislature is 20 minutes down the road. We have legislators in and around the university all the time. When the center was designed, we were told we had to be built for no more students than we currently have and no other academic programs than we currently have. That was a legislative mandate. So figuring out how to bring a larger public into these discussions that helps us break down some of those barriers would be extremely useful.